I've had the DJI Air 3S for the last 2 weeks, and I've been able to push it to its limits and capture some incredible photo and video with it. I'm having an absolute blast with this drone. So today I want to walk you through what I love about this drone and all of its strengths. I want to walk you through what I don't love about this drone and some of its weaknesses. And then I want to let you know who exactly this drone is for. All right, let's first kick things off with the photo and video quality, because goodness me, the photo and video coming out of this drone, absolutely stunning. You've got two cameras on this drone. You've got the main camera locked in at 24mm with a 50 megapixel sensor. And then you've also got the second camera, which is the tele camera. That's locked in at 70mm with a 48 megapixel sensor. So resolution coming out of this drone is no issue whatsoever. And overall image and photo quality looks great. When you're shooting raw photos from either camera with this drone, you've got a load of flexibility when you're editing them, which is super nice. I find the dynamic range is great. And overall, the colors that are coming out of this drone look really good as well. Now moving on to the video side of things, where I'm arguably blown away the most, you've got 4K 10-bit D-Log-M recording, and while I wish you could film in true D-Log, not D-Log-M, I can't complain here. The footage coming out of this drone and what you're seeing on screen right now is nothing short of gorgeous. I've had an absolute blast shooting in low light conditions, cloudy conditions, golden hour, daylight, you absolutely name it. And I'm yet to find any conditions where this drone is struggling to capture good looking footage, which is really nice. Now, moving on from the stunning photos and videos, let's move into some of the things that make this drone an absolute beast, aside from the cameras. First up on the list is the 42 gigabytes of built-in storage in this drone. I can tell you right now, this is a lifesaver. Not only if you have a smallish size card, or maybe like me, you forgot to format your card from previous shoots. Yes, shoots, not just a shoot, but previous shoots in the past. When you're flying, if you run out of storage, it's no issue whatsoever. You can just switch over to the 42 gigabytes of internal storage on the drone, and you're good to go. You can keep flying, you can keep shooting, and you don't have to bring it down, swap the card out, or quickly try and delete a load of stuff off the SD card. You can just continue as is. The 42 gigabytes of inbuilt storage on this drone, an absolute lifesaver. Now, I know I mentioned it before, but of course you've got two cameras on this drone, one at 24mm and one at 70mm. Now, I want to bring this up again because I find that the 24mm and the 70mm focal distances pair perfectly. When you're trying to match clips together, when you're trying to create a wide shot and then cut into a tight shot, the difference between 24 and 70mm is genuinely like a match made in heaven. Very well done here, DJI. Now, while we're on the topic of the cameras on the Air 3S, I want to talk to you about the image quality between the 70mm focal length and the 24mm focal length. Obviously, the 24mm focal length is the main camera and the 70mm focal length is the second camera. Now, I would assume that there would be quite a large, or at least a significant difference between image quality between camera number one, the main 24mm one, and camera number two, the telephoto 70mm one. However, I'm finding that not to be the case. I've shot a load of photo and video both on the 24mm and the 70mm lens on this drone, and I can tell you right now that the image quality is nearly identical. I was a little bit worried about this, as for example, let's say you zoom in on your phone, right? Let's say you tap on the 5x lens, the quality reduces a little bit, usually from time to time. However, that is not what I found on the Air 3S. Both the 70mm and the 24mm lens and their respective cameras have incredibly good image quality, and I don't feel like I'm sacrificing anything when I'm zooming into 70mm. That is, of course, aside from the 70mm lens being locked in at f2.8 and your 24mm lens being locked in at f1.8. That technically means you're getting better low light performance when you're shooting with the 24mm lens. However, if you're shooting in well-lit conditions, like 90% of the time, like I am, then you will not notice any difference whatsoever. All right, moving on to the controller. This is exactly the same controller, at least it feels and looks exactly the same as the Mini 4 Pro, which I have no issue with whatsoever. I like the way it feels in the hand, and I like the two antennas because I find, or at least I think, that the reception and the connection to the drone is way better. I've been flying in a lot of cities, which is renowned for having bad drone connection, since there's just so much going on. There's so much metal and buildings and you name it happening. And I have not had this drone cut out on me once, and I've flown it pretty far away, which is really nice once again. Now, something that is always an interesting topic to talk about is battery life. Now, DJI is claiming that you'll get 45 minutes of flight time, and that might be true. However, that's going from 100% to 0%. And I would never recommend flying the last maybe even 10% of your drone battery. You at least want to make sure it's in your vicinity, and your remote would probably be going crazy at that stage anyway, so you don't want to be far away. I'm always landing my drone between 20 and 15% usually if I'm flying a full battery, and I'm finding I'm at least getting about 30 to 35 minutes, somewhere in that range. Of course, it all depends on the weather conditions, and like I said, I'm not flying the battery to 0%, so while I'm not getting 45 minutes of flight time, I have no issue with that whatsoever. 30 to 35 minutes up in the air, shooting, composing your shots, finding the best light, you name it, is more than enough. And if you get the Fly More combo, you get 2 extra batteries, so that gets you a total of 3 batteries that you can charge all in this one docking station, which gives you at least, I would say, especially if you're flying in harsh weather conditions, an hour and a half of flight time, which is more than enough usually, in most cases. Hopefully it is for you too. All right, and the last thing I want to sing the praises of the Air 3S about is the active track. But I'll be honest, I haven't used the active track at all, at least how it's supposed to be used with moving subjects, because I just haven't been in those environments just yet. However, something that I do all the time to get really consistent, nice movement in my shots is to select a static subject in my frame and then have my drone track that to keep it in the middle of the frame and then fly around it. Whether that's gonna be like an orbital pan with a raise or a drop, or it's flying back, you name it. And this just makes my overall drone flying experience much easier, which is awesome. And that's what I've been doing with the Air 3S. I've been doing that wide, and I've also been doing that tele. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to zoom into 70mm, draw a box around something, and then track it, or at least track it accurately, but I've been able to do that. So DJI, thanks for that. You're nailing the tracking, much appreciated once again. All right, now let's move on to the things that I'm not 100% in love with, but I can live with. The first one on the list is not being able to change the aperture. I know I've already mentioned it, but the 24mm camera locked in at f1.8 and the 70mm locked in at f2.8, that is it. Can't go up, can't go down. Now that means a few things. The first one means that you have less ways to control your exposure, especially if you want to keep the 180-degree shutter rule. So if you're shooting in, let's say, 30 frames per second, you want to make sure your shutter is 1/60. Well, if it's really bright, you might have to crank your shutter speed up. And if you've already dropped your ISO to 100, you don't have any other options but to use an ND filter. Now, I have no issue using an ND filter whatsoever, but when you're up in the air and the light is changing pretty quickly, let's say you're shooting at sunrise, for example, and it's gone from golden hour and now the sun's really come up and now everything's way too bright. Sometimes I've got to pull the drone back down, land it, change the ND filter, and then pop it back up. It's really not the end of the world, but I do like having the freedom and flexibility of changing the aperture like I do on my Mavic 3 Classic. I wish you could change the aperture on this drone. However, now I've just got to really make sure I never forget my ND filters when I take this with me. Next up is only being able to shoot in D-Log-M. This really isn't a deal breaker, but I do like being able to have the full freedom and flexibility. That seems like a little bit of a theme with being able to shoot in true D-Log. Now, D-Log-M is great. You still get a lot of flexibility when it comes to color grading. And if you're just getting started with color grading and flying drones overall, then it's probably a good thing that you can't shoot in true D-Log, because D-Log-M pretty much gets you 50% of the way there when it comes to color grading. So that is nice. But I wish for me, I could shoot in D-Log and just get an even flatter readout of my image, but it's not a deal breaker. All right, and last but not least, this is nothing to do with the drone or how it performs, what the image quality looks like whatsoever, but it's this, the front cover thing. I know it's not a huge deal, but when the light's really nice and you're quickly pulling things out of your camera bag, landing your drone, putting things away, you name it, you want to make sure that things can move quickly. And you can put this on and take it off pretty quickly, but it's just a little bit strange. You've kind of got to like clamp the plastic down, and I feel like I'm going to break it. And then putting it back on is just a little bit finicky, if you will. It's not a deal breaker at all, and none of these things that I don't love about the Air 3S are deal breakers. There you go, it's back on. It just feels a little bit weird, and I hope that one day I don't squeeze it too hard and break it. But anyway, that's the last thing I'm not absolutely in love with about this drone. Once again, for the billionth time, they're definitely not deal breakers for me. So who is this drone for? Well, surprise, surprise, this drone's actually for me. I love this drone. It ticks every single one of my boxes aside from being able to shoot in D-Log and change the aperture, but these are things I can live with. Before I got this drone, my main drone was the Mavic 3 Classic, but stacking this up against it, this drone just draws me in far more. You've got the second camera, which gives you just a completely different perspective on flying your drone, which is awesome. And then it's also a little bit smaller, which is nice as well, especially when I'm trying to pack light or just not take as much stuff with me. It's a nice welcome upgrade. So with that being said, if you are currently looking to upgrade from one of the more beginner drones like a Mavic Mini or a Mini 4 Pro, or even if you've got one of the older Pro drones like the Mavic 2 Pro, for example, I think the Air 3S is an incredible buy and an incredible upgrade. Even if you're a seasoned photographer or videographer and you just want to kind of have a smaller footprint and a smaller drone, and or have a drone with a second camera if your current drone like the Mavic 3 Classic doesn't have one, this is also a great buy. But if you need to shoot in 5.1K, you need true D-Log, not D-Log M. And of course, you need the ability to be able to change your aperture, then this drone is not going to be for you. But I can tell you right now, this drone is going to be for a lot of people.